Dear shorthand writers, this is YouTube channel Parliamentary Reporter. English shorthand dictation number 169. Speed 140 words per minute. Ready? Start. Sir, the amendment which I am moving is totally different from the amendment which has been moved by my honorable friend. His amendment provides that under certain circumstances the school board shall have the right to remove from office the administrative officer who has been appointed by the government. My amendment is fundamentally different from the amendment of my friend. My amendment does not give the school board the power to remove or dismiss an administrative officer. All that the amendment seeks to do is that during the period when an administrative officer is engaged in doing his service as an administrative officer under a particular school board, that school board shall have disciplinary control over him. Sir, it must be realized that clause 12 of the bill is an anomalous clause in principle. It is an accepted principle that an officer must be subordinate to the authority whose servant he is. Now, by this clause 12, we have provided that the administrative officer shall be appointed by the provincial government and that he shall also be the servant of the provincial government. The evil effects of this anomaly have been pointed out by various members of the House who have spoken on the amendment which was tabled by my honorable friend. Therefore, I do not wish to take the time of the House in repeating what has been stated. What would be the result of enacting clause 12? I have my sympathy with the Honorable Prime Minister in the procedure which he has adopted, namely the administrative officers should be appointed by the provincial government and should be the servant of the provincial government, and for two reasons. One reason why I sympathize with the view he has taken is this. If the local boards or the school boards continue to appoint the administrative officers, the one result will be that the administrative officer will have to spend all his life in one place, which is undoubtedly a bad thing in principle, because when an officer remains in service in one particular place all his life, he does create a party for himself, secures friendship, and therefore provides for himself opportunities and occasions for exercising his administrative power in a partial way. Therefore, it is very desirable that these administrative officers should be moved from place to place, just as the practice of moving important officers like the collector or the district judge from district to district. The second reason why I felt a certain amount of sympathy for the procedure adopted by the Honorable Prime Minister is this. Unless the government appoints the administrative officers, it is not possible to provide a cadre with a regular service, with prospects of promotion and so on. I fully sympathize with that view. But sir, I do not understand why it should be difficult for government to place these officers under the school boards, at least for the purpose of disciplinary control. I do not understand how the smooth working of the local board machinery as contemplated in this bill can be secured unless the amendment which I am suggesting is given effect to. I should like to illustrate what I have to say by reference to what has happened under the Government of India Act. I would take for illustration the position of the members of the Indian Civil Service. The members of the Indian Civil Service are appointed by the Secretary of State. At the time when the Montague-Chelmsford report was made, I think those who have read it will realize that one of the greatest difficulties that was felt at the time in transferring effective control to ministers was just the opposition of the members of the Indian Civil Service. The contention of the members of the Indian Civil Service was that as they were appointed by the Secretary of State and not by the ministers who were going to take office under the then contemplated reforms, they protested that they could not subject themselves to any control by ministers. On the other hand, those who were upholding the cause of transferring effective power to Indian ministers decided that there could be no effective transfer of power to the Indian ministers unless the Indian ministers had effective power of controlling the Indian civil service members who were the instrumentality of the administration. For a long time, this tussle was going on, and as a matter of compromise, it was decided as a result of the report of the Lee Commission that the via media should be the via media which I am suggesting by my amendment. As per the classification rules, it was provided that 5 different kinds of punishments might be levied by the ministers against a recalcitrant ICS man who refused to obey the orders of the ministers. The punishments that were prescribed and which the Indian ministers could exercise under those rules were censure, reduction, stopping of promotion, transfer, and dismissal. The civil servant at the same time was given a right of appeal if he felt that a punishment had been inflicted upon him by the minister which was not proper, which was unjust, or which was based upon racial antagonism. The civil servant would take his appeal to the governor and finally to the Secretary of State and challenge the order of punishment passed by the minister. In this way, the two contending points of view, namely no control and absolute control, were brought to a common meeting point. The formula that was devised was that the civil servants should remain servants of the Secretary of State, liable to be dismissed by the authority who appointed them. But during the period that they were working as servants in the department, they should be subject to the disciplinary control of the minister in charge of the department. Sir, the amendment which I have tabled merely gives effect to the formula that I have just mentioned. It does not take away the right of the minister to appoint. It does not take away the right of the minister to dismiss an administrative officer, nor does the amendment say that during the period that the administrative officer is serving under a school board, he shall be regarded as the servant of the school board. The amendment is of a very limited character. It merely says that during the period that he is working as the administrative officer of the school board shall have disciplinary control. Further, what kind of punishment the school board shall levy and what is the nature of the appeal that the administrative officer is to have are still matters which by my amendment are left to the government to prescribe by rules. I do not say that this or that kind of punishment may be inflicted upon the administrative officer by the school board. I do not say that this or that alone should be the right of appeal. The nature of punishment, the extent of appeal, etc., is left to the discretion of the government to provide for by rules. All that the amendment does is to ensure that during the period that he is working, he shall feel that the school board has control over him. If we do not give even this little power to the school board, I do not quite understand how an administrative officer will feel by the necessities of the case that he is really the servant of the school board. I ask the Honorable Prime Minister, supposing he himself had no such power over the civil servant that was working under him, if he could not punish him for any disobedience on his part, what would be the state of his own department? I submit that in the interest of smooth working, at least this much must be given to the school board in order that the administrative officer shall feel that he is bound to carry out the just and lawful order of the school board. With these words, I commend my amendment to the House. Mr. President, I have listened with very great interest to the speech delivered by the Honorable Minister in charge of this bill. Sir, I must also say that I have listened to it with very grave concern. I am sure there can be no two opinions on the fact that this bill deals with some very vital issues.